Florida.
Mr. President, I want to add to these comments. First, let me just say in this time of there's a lot of noise and news about sort of the divisions in American politics that despite differences of opinion on issues, this is what I believe the people of Florida want us to do, and that is to come here and work together on the issues that we can work together on. And on that front, I must say that the ability to work with Senator Nelson on this has been invaluable. To have two senators from two different parties singing from the same song sheet about the priorities that are critical to our state. And what's unique about the storm and disaster relief is that the impact on Florida wasn't just the impact on Florida, it was also the impact on Puerto Rico. The impact on Puerto Rico has had an impact, obviously, on Puerto Rico, but also on Florida. And Senator Nelson touched upon that a moment ago. When the House passed its relief package at the end of December, it had a lot of good things in it. The President came out with his proposal, and it had some good things, but it needed work. And then the House took it, and the House added a few things to it. But over the last 2 months, it's been the ability to work here in the Senate, not in front of the cameras, not obviously through a series of press conferences, but the way legislation is put together and the way we were able to work together and our offices work together, that we were able to come out with a concise, unified position on the needs of both Florida and Puerto Rico, working the leadership of the Democratic Party on his side and the Republican on ours. And I got to tell you, in a place where it's very hard to get 60% of what you want, and that's a win, when you start to go through some of the items that are going to be in this relief package, it would be hard to complain. With perhaps a small exception here or there, virtually all of the things that are critical for disaster relief for Florida, and to a large extent as well for Puerto Rico, are going to be included in this. And I think, while a lot of us were very concerned about how long it took, we should have done this 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, there are other reasons why. It wasn't the disaster relief that was holding it up. It was the other issues that were at play that were holding it up. In fact, this was being held back until the other things were agreed on. But now we're going to be able to move forward, and I just have to say that while no one wants to have a hurricane and no one wants to have a natural disaster, I think this is a response that we should be happy about. And I think a testament to the sorts of things that we can achieve here in the Senate when we can put aside our differences on other issues and work together on this. By the way, I want to say, because I don't want anyone to read into that we've got big differences. We vote differently on a lot of issues, but Senator Nelson and I cooperate on a host of things, from judges to anything that impacts Florida. And I hope we can get to doing that more as a Senate, not just in Florida. Maybe Senator Nelson and I just are always in a good mood because it doesn't snow in Florida, and it's warm where everywhere else is cold. But I think people of Florida should be pleased at our ability to work together. Some highlights, Senator Nelson touched on a lot of them, but I'll start with the Puerto Rico part because it's the one that we still see the impact of on a regular basis. Let me just as an aside say that Jennifer Gonzalez, this is important, the resident commissioner, basically the member of Congress representing Puerto Rico in the House, is an extraordinary advocate for Puerto Rico. Not a good one, not a great one, an extraordinary one. She's tireless, nonstop. I'm talking about Sunday evenings, Sunday nights, early Monday morning, constant work, constant, an incredible partner in this endeavor. And the things that she's been able to achieve, because even when we got agreement on a lot of this in the Senate, we had to go to Jennifer and ask for her help to make sure that leadership in the House would be on board. And the respect that House leadership has for her was instrumental. Because in the end, because of the way this is now lined up, no matter what we agreed to here, if we send it over there and they don't want it, we couldn't do it. Her ability to get the House to go along with these changes is invaluable, and I just need to say that publicly. So much of this is due directly to her. She is the voice of Puerto Rico in Washington. And to the extent that these things are happening above and beyond what would have already happened, it is, in large respect, due to having her here. She's just phenomenal, and the ability to work with her has made this possible. Senator Nelson talked about the Medicaid cliff that Puerto Rico faces, and last year we were able to fill that gap for 1 year. This does it for 2 years through funding 100% called FMAP. It's what we did for the state of Louisiana after Katrina. And we're replicating that model here because now for the next 2 years, Puerto Rico doesn't have to worry about that. They can focus on the other issues without having to worry about that. There's money in disaster relief to repair infrastructure, money to repair hospitals. to repair hospitals and community health centers. There's $75 million for displaced college students that had to leave their school in Puerto Rico or in the Virgin Islands for that matter. There's over $11 billion for CDBG funds, which is going to go directly to Puerto Rico. And by the way, the Virgin Islands also gets $2 billion. There's $45 million to restore the Customs House in San Juan. There's money for Job Corps centers to help retrain and get people going again, to get employment functioning. Coast Guard repairs. Puerto Rico, the U.S. border in the Caribbean is Puerto Rico. And so having the Coast Guard, not just to respond to disasters at sea, but to be able to enforce law and prevent drug smuggling. You know, you smuggle drugs into Puerto Rico, you're in the United States. There's no customs from that point forward. So it's so critical. Help to repair clinics that were serving women, infants, and children. HHS funding. $150 million to replenish the disaster relief fund as it applies to Puerto Rico. Transportation funding, particularly improvements to the FAA and the facilities at the airport, the federal highways. It's everything that was important is there. And there's more to do. And next week we'll have a new initiative. I'm not prepared to discuss it yet, but an initiative separate from disaster relief to help Puerto Rico not just recover from the storm, but set itself up for long-term economic success. And I look forward to unveiling that next week. But for the time being, this is perhaps the first good news that the people of Puerto Rico have gotten from Washington since the storm hit. And I just want to say it is due to the partnership, Senator Nelson and myself, but also, frankly, the extraordinary assistance of the leadership here in the Senate of my party, Senator McConnell, the appropriations staff and members on both sides of the aisle, who have all, from the very beginning, expressed a willingness to be helpful. We don't often come to the floor to talk about good news of our process, but we couldn't be more pleased. And Senator Nelson talked about the impact on Florida. We'll rapidly go through some of those. We've come to the floor multiple times to talk about the need to help our citrus industry, Florida's signature crop. This has the money to do so. This will be an incredibly large effort for the Secretary of Agriculture to administer this, but I know I speak for Florida's growers when I say that this is important work. Feeding our nation is important work, and I stand committed to working with the Secretary and with our Commissioner of Agriculture, Adam Putnam, who is aware of this and has been instrumental in putting together this package. Really important. There's important funding here for the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, Emergency Conservation Program, Rural Development Water and Wastewater Grants, Emergency Food Assistance, funding to repair the agricultural research facilities. There are 4 of these in Florida. Those are the facilities that are going to innovate the cures that we need to save Florida's citrus in the long term. There's money here for education, particularly educational infrastructure repairs to help displaced students and to hire new teachers. This is especially important. We've now seen thousands of students that have, U.S. citizen students that have come from Puerto Rico to Florida to get their education. There's money to help our higher education facilities, to rebuild facilities that were damaged in the storm. Money to help displaced higher education students. There's $35 million for Project SERV, S-E-R-V, which is an education-related expenses for local education agencies and higher education institutions to help them recover from violent or traumatic events. There's $25 million to assist homeless students. $650 million for Head Start. And I would note that there are at least 45 damaged Head Start facilities in Florida. Community block grant funding to the tune of about $28 billion, of which $16 billion will be directed for unmet needs and $12 billion for mitigation to prevent the loss of these facilities in the future. The list goes on and on. There's more that we'll be putting out even more details. The Army Corps has a lot of important projects in Florida. And, but there's one in particular that as we go through, there's over $600 million for repairs through the operations and maintenance funds. $810 million in flood control and coastal emergency funding. You know, we had Everglades restoration projects going on in Florida that were damaged by the storm, including these large retaining ponds. I say ponds are basically lakes. They're enormous hot bodies of water that are used to clean out phosphates. Some of them were overrun, flooded, damaged. This helps. By the way, this is also going to, in addition to expedite the completion of the Herbert Hoover Dike, which is critically important to people living in the Glades community just south of Lake Okeechobee, just expedite that. This wasn't part of the budgets at the beginning. This is a project that's already been authorized, but the ability to move that forward is critical because it's going to help free up funds and time for all the other important projects with regards to restoring the Everglades and by the way, preventing the overflow of Lake Okeechobee, which could kill people. So let me wrap up with this. There's one in particular, the South Atlantic Coast Comprehensive Study. It's a federal project that basically looks at vulnerabilities to sea level rise of coastal areas and things of that nature. That's going to be a part of this, because long going in the future, we're going to continue to see the threats that this poses because of storm surge and the like. And of course, there's some language in there modeled after a bill that I had filed. It gives the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response direct hiring authority to ensure that HHS has the necessary emergency medical personnel to respond to another natural disaster, because the hurricane season is about 5 months away. There is $60 million for community health center repairs, about 28 in Florida, nearly 100, by the way, in Puerto Rico. $50 million for NIH for specific grants and infrastructure repairs. Within the top line numbers for FEMA in this, there will be a total of $33 billion for Stafford reimbursable costs. And of course, we're involved in ongoing discussions with the administration, which is responsible for directly coordinating with the governors in the states with regards to this. But this should be more than enough to pay the unmet cost for hospital repairs, medical services, et cetera. A couple more points. We have a massive debris problem, particularly in Monroe County, these canals in the Florida Keys that still have like refrigerators, lawn furniture, sunk boats. This has money in there to help clean that. Local governments have run out of money, they can't do it. This repairs Coast Guard facilities that were damaged by these storms. It has funds of $1.65 billion for Small Business Administration loans. The National Park Service, I toured the Everglades with Secretary Zinke. This has $207.6 million for construction that will include repairs to the destroyed facilities by the National Park Service. Funding for under the Department of Transportation, $140 million for Florida. That includes $8 million for FAA facilities, $100 million just for Florida for the Federal Highway Administration, $27 million for Florida Transit Administration. And finally, under FEMA, the Disaster Relief Fund is fully funded to meet the unmet needs. This money will ensure that FEMA has the resources needed to assist disaster survivors, as well as to repair and restore damaged infrastructure in Florida and in Puerto Rico. I just hope that we can get support for this. I know that I saw the senator from Texas here a few moments ago. I imagine he may speak to that at some point, if not today. Texas also suffered terribly. Virgin Islands suffered. California's had the fires. But I would say that it took longer than we wanted to. But I think the people of Florida should be very pleased with the disaster relief package that the Senate is about to present, and hopefully will pass in the House. And this is good news. And I was grateful to be a part of it. I want to thank my staff. They worked incredibly hard to help advance this. And we've been waiting for this day. We're excited this day is finally here. It makes our service here really meaningful when you can take your actions and turn into progress and results. This is the reason why, one of the reasons why I ran for re-election when at one point I didn't think I would, is to come back and make a difference. And today I know that working with so many others, including Jennifer Gonzalez in the House and Senator Nelson and our leadership here in the Senate, we're about to make a real difference. It makes our time here rewarding. And I'm excited to have been a part of it, and I look forward to doing more. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.